So, hello and welcome back to another evening where my cat has the zoomies and is running around just outside of my door. So, if you hear thumping or meowing, that would be him. He is such a goofy cat. Like, can we talk for just a second about how insane cats can be from time to time? It's so funny too because he will lay there like a lump, what, 20 hours of the day, but 4 hours at random intervals, never 4 hours at a stretch, he decides to go absolutely zoomy happy, and he usually does it when I'm trying to record. Because that is what cats do. And it doesn't help that he's an orange cat, so like most orange cats, he does only have one brain cell. It's a good brain cell, but I'm pretty sure he only has one brain cell, which is a joke. He's a very smart kitty. Most of the time. Kind of. Sort of. Maybe. Anyway, enough about my cat. We are here, as always, to jump in and see what is in the center of the earth, at least according to Mr. Jules Verne. So that is what we're going to do. We're definitely reading 2 chapters. It might be a super special night. We might get 3. I'm going to see, because one of these chapters seems very small, but sometimes it seems like by the time I've done 2, I'm like, no, that's right about at that 30-minute mark, which is the sweet spot I'm trying to keep these at. So anyway, enough of that. We are going to jump back in and begin with chapter 25 of Journey to the Center of the Earth by Jules Verne. I therefore woke up on Sunday morning without the usual preoccupations of an immediate departure. And even though we were in the deepest abyss, that was still pleasant. In any case, we had gotten used to this troglodyte life. I hardly thought of the sun, stars, moon, trees, houses, and towns anymore, or of any of those earthly superfluities which sublunary beings have turned into necessities, being fossils. We did not care about those useless wonders. The grotto was an immense hall. Along its granite floor, our faithful stream ran gently. At this distance from the spring, the water had the same temperature as its surroundings and could be drunk without any difficulty. After breakfast, the professor wanted to devote a few hours to putting his daily notes in order. First, he said, I'll calculate our exact position. I hope, after our return, to draw a map of our journey, a kind of vertical section of the globe which will retrace the itinerary of our expedition. Well, that'll be interesting, Uncle, I said. But are your observations sufficiently accurate? Yes. I've carefully noted the angles and the slopes. I'm sure there's no mistake. Let's see where we are now. Take your compass and note the direction. I looked at the instrument and replied after a careful study, east a quarter, southeast. Good, said the professor, writing down the observation and calculating quickly. I infer that we've gone 85 leagues from our point of departure. So we're under the mid-Atlantic? Exactly. And perhaps at this very moment there's a storm unleashed above and ships above our heads are being tossed by waves and hurricanes? It's possible. And whales are lashing the roof of our prison with their tails? Don't worry, Axel. They won't manage to break it. But let's get back to our calculating. We're 85 leagues southeast of the foot of the Snaffels, and I estimate we're at a depth of 16 leagues. 16 leagues? I exclaimed. No doubt. But that's the upper limit that science has calculated for the thickness of the Earth's crust. I don't deny it. And here, according to the law of increasing temperature, there should be a heat of 15,000 degrees Celsius. Should, my boy. And all this solid granite could not remain solid. It would be completely molten. You see, that's not so. And that, as so often happens, fact has contradicted theory. I'm forced to agree, but it does amaze me. And what does the thermometer say? 27 6/10 degrees Celsius. Therefore, the scholars are wrong by 1,474 4/10 degrees. So, the proportional increase in temperature is a mistake. So Humphrey Davy was right, and I was not wrong in following him. What do you have to say now? Nothing. In truth, I had a great deal to say. In no way did I accept Davy's theory. I still believed in core heat, although I did not feel its effects. I preferred to believe, really, that this chimney of an extinct volcano was covered with a refractive lava coating that did not allow the heat to pass through its walls. But without bothering to find new arguments, I simply accepted the situation as it was. Uncle, I resumed, I believe all your calculations are accurate, but allow me to draw one rigorous conclusion from them. Go ahead, my boy. At the latitude of Iceland, where we now are, the radius of the Earth is about 1,583 leagues. 1,583 leagues and a third. Let's just say 16,000 leagues in round numbers. Out of 16,000 leagues, we've covered 12? As you say. And the 12, by going 85 leagues diagonally? Exactly. In about 20 days? In 20 days. Okay, now 16 leagues are the 100th part of the Earth's radius. At this rate, we'll take 2,000 days or nearly 5 years and a half to get to the center. The professor gave no answer. Without mentioning that if a vertical depth of 16 leagues can be reached only by a diagonal descent of 84, we have to go 8,000 miles to the southeast, and we'll emerge from some point in the Earth's circumference long before we get to the center. Oh, to hell with your calculations, said my uncle in a fit of rage. To hell with your hypothesis. What's the basis of them all? How do you know that this passage doesn't run straight to our goal? Besides, we have a precedent. What I'm doing, another man has done before, and where he's succeeded, I'll succeed in turn. I hope so, Uncle, but may I be permitted? You're permitted to hold your tongue, Axel, if you're going to talk in that irrational way. I could see the awful professor threatening to reappear under the surface of my uncle, so I took the hint. Now, look at your manometer. What does it indicate? Considerable pressure. Good. So you see that by going down gradually, and by getting accustomed to the density of the atmosphere, we don't suffer at all. True. Not at all, except a little pain in the ears. That's nothing. And you can get rid of that discomfort by putting the outside air in rapid contact with the air in your lungs. Exactly, I said, determined not to say a word that might contradict my uncle. There's even genuine pleasure in being immersed in this dense atmosphere. Have you noticed how far sound carries down here? Undoubtedly. A deaf man would end up hearing perfectly. But won't this density increase? Yes, according to a rather ill-defined law. It's well known that the gravity decreases as we descend. You know that it's at the surface of the earth that weight is most acutely felt, and that the center, the object should have no weight at all. I'm I'm aware of that, uncle, but tell me, won't the air at last become as dense as water? No doubt, under a pressure of 710 atmospheres. And lower? Lower down, the density will increase even more. So, how will we go down then? Well, we'll fill our pockets with stones. Really, uncle, you're never at a loss for an answer, I said. I dared venture no farther into the region of hypotheses, for I might once again stumble over an impossibility that would make the professor rage. Still, it was obvious that the air, under a pressure that might reach thousands of atmospheres, would at last turn solid, and then, even if our bodies could resist, we would have to stop in spite of all the reasoning in the world. But I did not insist on this argument. My uncle would have held it against his inevitable Saknussemm a precedent without value, for even if the journey of the Icelandic scholar had actually taken place, there was one very simple question yet to answer. In the 16th century, neither barometer or manometer had been invented, so how could Saknussemm have determined whether he had arrived at the center of the globe? But I kept this to myself, and I let events take their course. The rest of our day was spent in calculations and conversations. I always agreed with the professor's opinions, and I envied Hans his complete indifference. Without looking so hard for effects and causes, Hans just went blindly wherever his destiny guided him to. And that is the end of chapter 25. So I'm going to get the drink, and I'll be right back. All right, hydration is always important. And I realized actually not long after I said it that I had misspoken, so I figured I'd correct myself now. I read at the beginning that the heat was supposed to be 15,000 degrees Celsius. It's 1,500 degrees Celsius, in case you guys were wondering how we went from 15,000 to 1,474 in that first little bit. I figure it's always important to correct yourself when you can. As to the rest of it, they are so far into the realm of speculative fiction that I can't even make any comments on it, because we are firmly in Jules Verne's imagination now. At least I think we are. So let's jump back in and see what is in store for us in chapter 26. It was true that so far things had gone well, and it would have been ungraceful of me to complain if the average number of difficulties did not increase. We could not fail to reach our goal. And then, what glory! I had come around to reasoning in this way, quite like a Lindenbrock. Seriously, was this due to the strange environment in which I was living? Perhaps. For several days, steeper slopes, some even frighteningly vertical, took us deeper into the interior rock. Some days we got a league and a half or two closer to the center. Dangerous descents, during which Hans's skill and marvelous calm were quite useful to us. The impassive Icelander devoted himself with incomprehensible unconcern to all of his tasks, and thanks to him, we overcame more than one dangerous spot that we never would have gotten through alone. But his silence, it increased day by day. I believe it even infected us. External forces do have real effects upon the brain. Whoever shuts himself up between four walls soon loses the power to bring words and ideas together. How many prisoners in solitary confinement become idiots, if not mad, for lack of exercising their thinking facilities? During the 2 weeks following our last conversation, no incident worthy of reporting occurred. I only find in my memory a single, very important event for good reason. It would have been difficult for me to forget even the slightest of its details. By August 7th, our successive descents had taken us to a depth of 30 leagues, which meant that there were 30 leagues of rock, ocean, continents, and towns above our heads. We must have been 200 leagues away from Iceland then. On that day, the tunnel went down a gentle slope. I was ahead of the others. My uncle was carrying one of the Ruhmkorff devices, and I the other, and I was examining layers of granite. Suddenly, when I turned around, I found that I was alone. Well, I thought, I've gone too fast, or Hans and my uncle have stopped along the way. Let's go, I must join them again. Fortunately, the path does not go up appreciably. I retraced my steps. I walked for a quarter of an hour. I looked. Nobody. I called. No response. My voice was lost in the midst of cavernous echoes that it suddenly called forth, and I began to feel uneasy. A shudder ran all over my body. A bit of calm, I said out loud to myself. I'm sure I'll find my companions again. There's only one path. Now, I was ahead, so let's just go further back. For half an hour, I climbed back up. I listened for a call, and in that dense atmosphere, it could come from far away. An extraordinary silence reigned in that immense tunnel. I stopped. I could not believe my isolation. I had only strayed from the path, not lost my way completely. After having strayed, one can find one's path again. Let's see, I said. Since there's only one path, and since they're on it, I must run into them. I just have to go further up. Unless, when they didn't see me, they forgot that I was ahead and they retraced their steps as well? Well, in that case, if I hurry up, I'll find them again. It's quite obvious. I said these last words again, like a man who is not convinced. In addition, even coming up with these simple ideas and bringing them together in coherent reasoning took me a very long time. A doubt then assailed me. Was I really ahead? Yes, Hans followed me, preceding my uncle. He had even stopped for a few moments to strap his baggage more tightly to his shoulder. This detail came back to me. It was at that very moment that I must have continued on my way. Besides, I thought, I have a reliable means of not getting lost, a thread that cannot break to guide me in this labyrinth, my faithful stream. All I have to do is follow its course in reverse, and I'll inevitably find traces of my companions. This reasoning revived me, and I decided to go on my way again without losing a moment. How I blessed my uncle's foresight then in keeping the hunter from stopping up the hole in the granite wall. This beneficent spring, which had quenched our thirst along the route, would now guide me through the meanderings of the earth's crust. And before starting out, I thought a washing up would do me good. I bent down to bathe my forehead in the Hansbach. Who could imagine my dismay when I touched rough, dry granite? The stream. It no longer ran at my feet. And that is the end of chapter 26. And yeah, we're going to do one more chapter because it's another short one. And I can't leave it at that cliffhanger, but I am going to get a drink. All right. Yeah, we definitely have to do one more chapter. I wonder where everybody could have disappeared to. I wonder if maybe Axel is just having a little hallucination going on. Maybe. I guess we'll have to wait and see. As we jump back in and finish up tonight with chapter 27 of Journey to the Center of the Earth by Jules Verne. I cannot describe my despair. No human words could express my feelings. I was buried alive with the prospect of dying from the tortures of hunger and thirst. Mechanically, I swept the ground with my burning hands. How dry the rocks seemed to me. But how had I left the course of the stream? For it was definitely no longer there. Then I understood the reason for that strange silence when I had listened for the last time for any call from my companions that might reach my ears. But at the moment when I took my first step along the wrong path, I hadn't noticed the absence of the stream. It's obvious at that moment a fork in the tunnel had opened up in front of me, while the Hansbach, following the whim of another slope, had gone away with my companions to unknown depths. How was I to get back? There were no traces. My foot left no mark on this granite. I racked my brain for a solution to this unsolvable problem. My situation could be summed up in one word: lost. Yes, lost at a depth that seemed immeasurable to me. Those 30 leagues of terrestrial crust weighed on my shoulders with a dreadful weight. I felt crushed. I tried to take my mind back to things of the earth. I could hardly manage it. Hamburg, the house on the Kunstragsee, my poor Grauben, all that world underneath which I had lost my way passed before my terrified mind. In a vivid hallucination, I relived all the incidents of our journey: the passage, Iceland, Mr. Fridriksson, the Snaffels. I told myself that if I still hung on to some glimmer of hope in my position, it would be a sign of madness, and that maybe it would be best to give in to despair. Indeed, what human power could take me back to the surface of the globe and break apart the enormous vaults of rock that buttressed each other above my head? Who could put me back on the right path and take me back to my companions? "Uncle!" I cried in a tone of despair. It was the only word of reproach that passed my lips, for I knew how much that unfortunate man must suffer in his turn while he looked for me. When I saw myself like this, beyond all human help, unable to do anything for my own well-being, I then thought of heavenly help. Memories of my childhood, especially of my mother, who I had only known in my tender early years, came back to me. I resorted to prayer, In spite of the few rights I had of being heard by a God to whom I directed myself so late in life, and I fervently implored him. This return to Providence calmed me a little, and I was able to concentrate all the power of my brain upon my situation. I had 3 days' worth of food supplies with me, and my flask was full, but I could not remain alone much longer. Should I go up or down? Of course, up, always up. I had to get back to a point where I had left the stream, that deadliest fork in the road. Then, with the stream at my feet, I might be able to return to the summit of the Sneffels. Why hadn't I not thought of that sooner? This was obviously a possibility for rescue. The most pressing task, therefore, was to find the course of the Hansbach again. I rose and, leaning on my iron-tipped stick, I walked back up the tunnel. The slope was rather steep. I walked on without hope and without indecision, like a man who has no choice as to what course he takes. For a half an hour, I met with no obstacles. I tried to recognize my path by the shape of the tunnel, by projections of certain rocks, by the arrangement of the crevasses, but no particular detail struck me, and I soon realized that this tunnel could not take me back to the fork. It came to a dead end. I struck against the impenetrable wall, and I fell down on the rock. The fear, the despair that then seized me cannot be described. I lay there overwhelmed. My last hope was shattered on this granite wall. Lost in this labyrinth whose meandering paths intersected in all directions, I no longer could attempt the impossible escape. I was going to die the most dreadful of deaths, and, strange to say, the thought crossed my mind that if my fossilized body were to be found one day, its discovery, 30 leagues deep in the bowels of the earth, would probably raise serious scientific questions. I wanted to speak aloud, but only hoarse noises came from my parched lips. I panted. In the midst of all these fears, a new terror laid hold of me. My lamp. It had been damaged when it fell. I had no means of repairing it. Its light was fading, and it was going to disappear. I watched the luminous current disappear in the wire coil of the appliance. A procession of moving shadows unfolded on the darkening walls. I no longer dared shut my eyes for fear of missing the smallest atom of this elusive light. Every moment it seemed that it was about to vanish and that blackness would engulf me. Finally, one last glimmer trembled in the lamp. I followed it. I drank it with my eyes. I concentrated all the power of my eyes on it as the very last sensation of light they would ever perceive. And then I was plunged into immense darkness. What horrid cries burst from me. On earth, even in the midst of the darkest night, light never vanishes altogether. It is diffuse, it is subtle, but however little there may be, the eye's retina manages to perceive it, but here, nothing. The total darkness blinded me in the world's most literal sense. Then I began to lose my head. I rose up with my arms stretched out before me, attempting to feel my way in the most painful manner. I began to run, rushing haphazardly through this maze, always going down, running through the earth's crust like an inhabitant of subterranean vaults, crying and calling and shouting. soon bruised by the projections of the rocks, falling, getting up again, bloody, trying to drink the blood that was on my face, and always expecting that some wall would present the obstacle on which I would fracture my head. And where did this mad careening take me? I'll never know. After several hours, no doubt at the very end of my strength, I fell down like a lifeless mass at the foot of the wall, and then I lost all awareness of my own existence. And that is the end of, what chapter was that, 27? Yeah, that was the end of chapter 27, and I feel like we didn't get much past the cliffhanger thing. Poor Axel. He didn't want to go on this trip in the first place. I'm still holding out hope that maybe this is just all some big fake out of Jules Verne's, and maybe this is just a nightmare that Axel is having. It's not beyond the realm of possibility, but who knows? I mean, since he's the narrator, he can't exactly die unless we find out at the end that his ghost is writing the book. I did like that one little thought that, you know, if he died down there and some future scientist finally gets to this depth and finds a fossilized human skeleton way down below the level that humans should be, what a anachronism he would present. I like that. Again, I keep saying it. It just feels like a Doctor Who episode, and I'm kind of loving it. So, thank you for listening. I hope that you enjoyed the 3 chapters. You got a bonus chapter tonight, and I will see you tomorrow.